All right, y'all. Welcome to season 4 of Lorraine Infinity Let's Talk podcast. We are wrapping up this season. We have a couple more interviews to go, or maybe this is the last official one. Who knows? We'll see. But I'm really excited about my guest today, my friend, my homie, work companions, all the things, even road dogs, I guess. We haven't really officially traveled together, but we have, but not all those things. But I'm going to let you introduce yourself first before we dive in.
Sure. Hello. My name is Rania Yasmin Zayyat. I'm 36 years old. My zodiac sign is Sagittarius Sun, Aquarius Moon, and Gemini Rising. Getting it all. And today I'm feeling grateful for the opportunity to share this space and this conversation with my friend Legina. And you're listening to Lorraine Infinity Let's Talk podcast, season 4, The Dynamics of Women.
The dynamics of women. Okay, so I have to start with how we met. We met at a mutual friend's wedding. No, we met before that.
First.
We met virtually for Share the Mic Now, Texas, that Jasmine Brand, me, Share Me, and Jennifer did. And it was really cool. And we didn't really interact that whole amount or whatever, but got to hear some of your story, was really intrigued, and then fast forward to Share Me's wedding. And I guess it's kind of serendipitous that we are drinking Share Me wine because this is actually her wedding bottles of wine.
Yes.
That she debuted at the wedding. And when your energy is just so calming, but you have this intensity in and behind your eyes that just lets me know there's so much more there. We were part of the assigned friends women's crew for Share Me at the wedding. And her wish was that, we had fun and danced and kept the vibes going. And, Mama Harris was there, of course. And we just had this great time. And I knew from that moment on that I just wanted to work with you on things. And so it's really cool over the last couple of years, like the amount of things we've ended up working on together and how I think it's just so transparent how when you show up as yourself, how it can transpire and support your business. So you just inspire me for who you are, your silent moments, your loud ones that are still very soft, and just the way that you humbly think about things. Like it always awes me even. I'm like, she's running a whole nonprofit and all these people are backing her. And she's like, I don't know that. What is that? What do you do there? And I'm like, that takes this like boldness that I don't even think that sometimes you recognize in yourself. So I'd say I appreciate you. And that's really inspirational to somebody like me that people perceive as like super brave and all this stuff. I'm like, nah, man, every day is like a new battle, right? With stuff. So I appreciate you for that and everything else. So we are going to dive in. We're going to play a game.
Okay.
It's called Let's Talk Fast. I play with everybody. It's word association.
Let's talk.
Let's talk. Hey, y'all. I just want to give you the heads up. There is definitely cursing, adult content, and there will be triggers in this episode as we look at and celebrate the journeys and the walks of women. Let's talk for real, because when we talk about women, the stories of women and why I'm doing this podcast, it's really profound. We were talking earlier, and for me, there's this nuance right now around defining yourself, identities, and those two things actually bring people further apart than anything right now. And to be clear, I am always open for talking about women, people of color, equality, for however you identify, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also tired of talking about that stuff.
Yeah.
Because like there's aliens now, that there's always been aliens, but now we're admitting there's aliens. The world is literally fire, famine, and flooding.
Yeah, it's exploding.
Yeah, it's imploding, exploding. It's all this stuff. So I'd be more encouraged to talk about those things. But while we're in these times doing this, it's so important because I meet so many women that are just on these amazing dynamic paths that have these stories that go untold.
Yeah.
So the stories of women are they shouldn't be badges of shame, right? Versus badges of growth and life experience. And I always say that like this podcast is focused on all women and how we grow and how we navigate and how we impact the world that we live in, to often tell the untold story. And the point of that is to support other people that don't know that that story is more normal than you think, right?
Yeah.
All our stories are so unique, but they just have this underlying message of like, just keep going, just keep going. And so I'm excited, I'm honored, I'm blessed that we're going to get to sit down and talk about all of everything you are, picking out those pieces of your journey that either you don't often get to tell or feel like need to be amplified more.
Yeah.
So first, let's take a sip of wine. So
Ooh,
cheers to that.
cheers.
Because my voice is ready.
Mhm.
Yeah, this bottle's going to be
So
gone because
good.
it's so good. Okay, so let's dive right in. Let's talk about how you grew up. Like, who are you? How'd you grow up? What was the family dynamics? What was that vibe?
Yeah. My childhood feels very split in a lot of ways because I was born in San Francisco.
Mhm.
I lived in and like near my dad's family,
Mhm.
pretty much from the time I was born till the time I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
My dad's family immigrated here to the US in, I think, the early 80s. My dad came over for college. His oldest brother was already living
Mhm.
here. Um,
Where'd they immigrate from?
So my dad was born in Kuwait.
Okay.
My uncle and my grandparents were all born in Bethlehem.
Okay.
They lived in Egypt and Jordan, and kind of I actually don't know all the details of like
Yeah.
where they lived, but I think Egypt was where they immigrated from. And my dad came over for college. He was sent to a Christian university in East Texas, very random, and met my mom's brother there. And they were going to school together, and then decided he wanted to drop out of school, didn't know what he wanted to do. So he decided to go out to the Bay Area where his brother was living.
Okay.
My mom had met him very briefly, fell in love with him very quickly, moved, like followed him basically out to California. They got married only a few weeks later, from my understanding. So there's a story there, I think. But yeah, like grew up basically like we lived in one household at one point with my
Mm.
grandparents and my uncle and my aunts and my cousins, and then my mom, and then I'm the oldest. And so yeah, we lived in a suburb called Antioch. In It's just a little bit. It's like 45 minutes from San Francisco
Mhm.
inland. And that was pretty normal, I guess. Like when you're a kid, you don't really know that growing up in a multi-generational household or a family with immigrants is like different until you're not in that environment.
Different in America.
Different in America.
Yeah, for
Thank you.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I don't, childhood was childhood, I guess. Like nothing, like we didn't do much as a family together. We spent a lot of holidays like with my grandparents. We didn't
Mhm.
travel much as a family. My dad was a mechanic for BMW in San Francisco. And my mom kind of worked like clerical and admin jobs here
Mhm.
and there. And she ended up taking a few years off from work whenever my youngest sister was born. I have two younger sisters.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then my mom is from Texas. And so in 1997, my dad and my mom decided that they wanted to move closer to my mom's family. My dad wanted to start his own business, his own auto shop, and figured he could do that more easily in
In
Texas.
Texas.
Yeah. So we moved out to Houston, here to Houston, in 1997, and lived in Southeast Houston. All of a sudden, with my mom's family, and that was kind of like where I feel like that split in my childhood happened because we never went back to California to
Mm.
visit my dad's family or to visit my grandparents. And I still have actually not been to where I grew up.
Wow. Okay.
So it feels like this very distant, like memory.
Mhm.
A part of me I know is still there, and I am really itching to get out there and just like see our childhood home and I don't know, collect some remnants of a past there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, all of a sudden we were here in Houston and living with my mom's parents. And then my dad ended up opening his own auto shop. Uh, but I think it was, yeah, only a couple years later. And Houston like was a big shift. I think just, I don't know. I can't really describe it, but it was just very different, obviously, going from living with my dad's family to,
Culturally.
yeah, culturally a big
Yeah.
shift.
And probably the weather, the time.
Oh my God. I do remember it raining like really hard the first summer that we were here.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what humidity was. And I remember asking my mom, like, why is it sticky outside? Like, what is this feeling? She was like, oh, you better get used to that. Like, that's
Mhm.
just weather here.
So Southeast Houston.
Yeah.
So all up and down Southeast Houston is like what it's a 5th Ward, 2nd Ward, 3rd Ward, and then Sunnyside is all over in that area.
Yeah. But we were down in like the burbs. So like Pasadena,
Oh
Deer
yeah.
Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. Houston is freaking
It's
huge.
massive. Yeah.
And then there's Houston proper, inner loopers, outer loopers,
Yeah.
second loopers. Like
I've lived all over, like,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So, little Rania in school, who were you? How did you navigate? I mean, and you go up and through college, right? Like, what were you interested in? What things were happening with you, or what
Yeah.
do you cognitively remember?
I was always shy. I think as just a kid in general, like socially very shy. I feel like I
Mhm.
still have the social anxiety. Um, but I was I'm the firstborn, so it was always like instilled in me that I had to go to college and I needed to study and like get good grades. And so I always did. I was always like an A student. I was really drawn to writing in junior high and high school. I wrote a lot of poetry and creative
What
writing,
kind of poetry?
really sad poetry, actually. My mom would be like, "What are you? Are you okay?" Like,
Yeah, that
um,
I have I feel like I don't embrace this, but I have written poetry since I was a child.
really,
Probably not as much in my adult life, but when I was a kid,
yeah,
I used to write like short, really dramatic
yeah,
shit and even just quotes,
yeah,
right? And one of them I remember because my nephew, like, I'll be like, Dean, get a book so that you can read it.
yeah,
And he always goes for the smallest, shortest looking book there is.
sure,
And my diary happens to be like my kid diary happens to be up on the shelves. And I think at some point, like I broke into it because I lost the key and
oh
there's a
yeah,
little lock on it. And I open it every now and then. And there's this quote talking about like having a best friend is like getting your heart ripped out or something.
right.
It,
Because
and
we
I'm
know what
like,
that feels like.
right. I'm like, damn, I've been this person forever.
Yeah.
Okay. So poetry, all of that kind of stuff. What did that develop into?
So it eventually led to me choosing journalism as my first like degree choice.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, like I've always leaned into like liberal arts. And like I remember the first thing I ever wanted to be was paleontologist. And then that morphed into archaeologist and then Egyptologist because I was all of a sudden really interested in like my family's like roots and
Mhm.
Egyptology. Yeah, and then it transformed into writing. And so I went to San Jac my first couple of years of college and I got my associates in journalism there. I was like assistant editor at the news for the newspaper at the school. And, I was involved in the yearbook and stuff in high school and junior high.
I was too.
Yeah,
I
it was
was a
fun.
yearbook editor in high school.
Nice.
Mhm.
It was fun,
Yeah.
I felt. Um, yeah, and then I think I don't know what happened, what the major shift was, but I just remember this is around the time that everyone was like, "Oh, newspapers are dying. Like everyone has to make the shift digitally, or like there's not going to be a future in journalism." Like it was just weird. And I started learning about anthropology. I
Mhm.
think it was my first semester. I transferred over to U of H and I had to choose a major. And I was really like not sure at that point if journalism was what I wanted to continue with.
Yeah.
And so I decided to take like this intro to anthropology course because it just sounded really interesting to me.
Hmm.
Um, and I loved it. I was like hooked on just anthropology in general,
Mm-hmm.
and was yeah, just trying to figure out like where that was going to lead me, and knew that I'd probably have to go to school for like graduate school and stuff.
Yep.
And
When it dawns on you that you have to continue school.
uh-huh.
I think I think the school thing for me was interesting because I remember different times in my life. One, I remember high school toward the end. I was like, "Oh, this is some bullshit." Like I
Mhm.
really was just over it. So by my senior year, I don't even remember being in classes versus I think it was called the tax test at the time was coming
Yep.
out. And my senior class was the testers for the test.
Mhm.
And the teachers were like, "Here's the test, there's a movie. Get done when you do, there's the
That's the
movie."
reward, yeah.
Yeah. And not even the reward, like, pick how you're gonna spend your day.
Sure.
It's like, "Okay,
Oh, yeah.
bet." And then I remember softball,
Uh-huh.
and I remember I was a peer mediator,
Okay.
so we got the run of the school because we were the people like, "Well, Legina and Rania, y'all need to sit across from each other, and, like, how did that make her feel?" Like, that kinda stuff, like,
Mm.
legit. And then
Some good
yearbook.
skills.
Yeah, so I was just running around the whole
Yeah.
time. And then I remember graduate school because I realized, like, how smart I was
Mhm.
and that, like, things like dyslexia and all that kinda stuff kind of were a superpower
Yeah.
if I understood how to use them because I can't spell worth shit, but
Mhm.
I can tell when something's spelled wrong.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I can always edit people's work,
Mhm.
but my writing is, like, subpar, but I can edit to a beautiful
Yeah.
written thing, so,
Yeah.
yeah. So after undergrad, did you end up going to graduate school?
Mm-mm.
Okay, what'd you do?
No. I was working the whole time I was in school,
Mhm. Where'd you work?
in restaurants. I got my first restaurant job actually while I was in high school,
Mhm.
here in Houston. It was, at a catfish restaurant that,
Sorry. Catfish is so trash.
it was called Catfish Galore and More, and, it was, uh, friends like, family friends that owned, not really family friends, they weren't friends with my family. How do I put
Family-owned
this?
restaurant?
It was a family-owned restaurant, but, like, the owners were, I'll explain, I guess, in a minute, but, uh, when I was in high school, my parents divorced when I was, in 7th grade, I think, and I decided to go live with my dad when I was in high school.
Interesting.
Um, I was probably when I was in 10th grade, I made the switch over, and he was living, in North Houston around Greenpoint area.
Mhm.
So I was like, I wanna be an only like, I wanted to have, like, my own room because I was still sharing a room with my sisters, and there was just a lot happening in my household that I was just like, "I need my space." And so I went to move in with my dad. Um, it was kind of some tumultuous years of my dad's life. He was partying a lot, and he had his own business and just wasn't really fit to, like, take care of me.
He was living the single man, no kid life,
Yes, even though
but
he
has
had a
kids.
kid
Yeah.
living with him,
Yeah.
and partying and, like, substance abuse and a lot of things. So I took care of myself a lot, in high school, and, whenever I think it was my junior or senior year, I was part of the Christian club at school, and I had come to Christianity on my own, like, at
Mhm.
that time, um, and it saved me, like, for a lot of reasons, but I made some really good friends, in high school, and one of them, this guy Todd, he was like, "I go to this prayer group every Monday night called House of Worship. It's led by this really amazing couple named Miss Levy and Mr. Mike.
Mhm.
If you wanna ever come to it, you're more than welcome to." And so I ended up going, and I, like, just felt there was something really special about what was happening in this place of worship.
Mhm.
And back in that time, they were still hosting it at like a hotel conference room.
Yeah.
Um,
S Let me ask you this.
yeah.
So you say that, like, 7th grade, your parents divorced,
Mhm.
and then you find Christianity somewhere after that,
Mhm.
and then you're going to these youth groups and stuff, and you said something about that saving you. Like, what
Mhm.
kinda stuff do you know or feel like it saved you from?
Um, I just didn't really know. I didn't realize what kind of danger I was in, I think, as a young person
Yeah.
living with a parent who, was using a lot of drugs,
Yeah.
and drinking and not taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
And my mom, I think, was kind of going through her own sort of freedom phase at that time because their relationship was pretty, from my understanding, my dad was very abusive,
Yeah.
not physically, but very manipulative, controlling,
Gaslighter type shit.
emotionally,
Yeah.
like just restrictive of like, you know, what my mom could spend on us and what, kind of groceries she could buy. And, uh, he lived a good life for himself, but didn't give much to his family.
Mm.
And so when he owned his own business, he all of a sudden was doing really well. And I, yeah, it was just, yeah,
It's a lot,
it
right?
was a lot.
It's I'll say this and I don't say it often, but like I feel like we're really good friends. Um, it's very interesting doing these interviews because it's so fascinating how much stuff we never talk about,
Yeah,
but it's there.
yeah,
And, half of processing is saying it, audibly. So
yeah,
sometimes you're just like thinking and you're like, yeah.
yeah.
So
That happened.
that happened.
Um, yeah, so I think the Christianity thing, my dad's family was actually very religious.
Okay.
But
Into
my
Christianity,
yeah,
Catholic,
just
Protestant.
I think Protestant in
Okay.
general. Like my dad, my parents weren't, but my uncle and my grandfather, like
Yeah.
they did Bible study every day. We watched a lot of gospel cartoons when I would go over to
Interesting.
my cousin's house. Like whenever I would practice piano with my grandfather, we were always singing hymns. So the first song I ever learned was "Jesus Loves Me." um, and so, yeah, I like came back to it, but it was really only because of the type of Christianity that I was exposed to with that place, that house of worship that I went to. It was primarily like Black Christians.
Mhm.
And I just like immediately felt like the room was full of love and like a
Yeah.
very safe space. And I ended up becoming really close to the woman and her husband who were leading these prayer groups.
Yeah.
And so they actually ended up getting their own church later, but they opened that restaurant that I worked
Ah,
at.
okay.
So they hired me and my friend Todd, and Todd's family. I also like ended up getting very close to, and I spent a lot of time with him and his
Mhm.
sisters and his parents. Um, but yeah, so I became a host. That was my first restaurant job
Interesting.
when they opened.
So you created family and safety for
Yes,
yourself almost.
yes,
And it sounds like very distinctively moving from Cali to Texas, family splitting, that's like also a defined moment for you living in another place where in the house, maybe not getting like full support, but something around there, people could say God's protection
sure,
created this whole centricity.
yeah,
Interesting, because like, later on, we're gonna find out that, like, you're in the restaurant industry
yeah,
now,
yeah,
spoiler alert, but
yeah.
okay. So, you're at this restaurant you're hosting, it's one of your first jobs, you're in
hmm
college, what else is going on?
This was actually when I was still in high school. I
Oh,
was, yeah, it was my senior year, and that same year, my dad. So my dad was running his business a little bit. Not a little bit. I mean, he was doing some illegal stuff at his shop,
yeah.
which he ended up getting busted for, along with yeah some possession stuff. And so he was sent to jail
Mhm,
my senior year, and I did not want to go live back with my mom because I was so close to graduating and I had all
mhm,
my friends there. So I actually ended up moving in with that couple,
okay,
Lovey and Mike. And they took me in, and I lived with them until I graduated high school. Um, and then once I graduated, my that was around the time my dad was getting out of jail, and so I decided to move back south with my mom
mhm,
briefly while I figured out what I wanted to do
mhm,
because my dad wanted to move out of state, and so I was either gonna follow him and again, try to like be this, I don't know, try taking care of him
Yeah.
kind of role. And so I moved down south again with my mom and then took about a year off before I started college. And then I very briefly moved to Denver with or Colorado Springs with my dad and realized that not
This
much
ain't
had
it.
changed.
Yeah.
And so I got a Greyhound bus ticket back by myself, and my mom picked me up from the Greyhound station in downtown Houston, and I went and applied for college, and yeah,
And that's how you got to college.
and that's yeah.
Do you and your mother or have y'all ever talked about that time at any point? Or is it just, like in some families, like the times like that is just she was there and we were here or
Yeah.
whatever. Do
Yeah.
y'all ever sit back and have talked about any of this stuff?
Yeah, we've talked about it quite a bit. And I would say at different times and in different ways. But, I think more recently I went on my first trip with my mom this year.
Oh, cool. Where'd y'all
We
go?
went to Mexico City.
Cool.
Yeah, it was really fun. But my mom and I, like, we have a great relationship. We talk all the time.
Mhm.
And sometimes I just want to dig a little bit deeper. And I feel like a lot of our conversations can be like very much like surface
Surface. How are
level.
you? How are you? I'm good.
Yeah.
How's the restaurant? Like,
Yeah. And we'll do that every single day. And it's great. And
yeah.
there's so much comfort in just hearing her voice. But I wanted to dig deeper on this trip. And so I was like, tell me something personal. Tell me, like, let's peel off a layer here.
Let's be
Mom and
millennial.
daughter, we're in Mexico. Like,
Yeah.
and that's when she told me a lot about my dad and hers relationship and just like how he was with her. And
Mhm.
then, things that I didn't necessarily need. I mean, they're always good to know, but, just things about after they got divorced, like how
Mhm.
he was ready to like give up his rights to us, like at
Yeah.
one point. Anyway,
Just all the fuckery
a
that
lot
goes
of
along with
things.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is so, my mother when she's here, Mama Hair stays with me or I stay with her
Yeah.
because she's the master of all domains. But it's always interesting to hear her tell stories about dad.
Mhm.
It's still accurate. Like my dad is my dad, great person, all that kind of stuff. But it's so funny because I mirror him very much so. Like,
Yeah.
everybody's like, "Oh, I see where you get all of your da 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 from your mom." I was like, "Yeah, but I am my dad's daughter." Like, the
Yeah.
people that knew my dad are like, "Oh my gosh." So, it's very interesting because I think there's always this wanting to be around a father. For me being a girl, I remember because
Yeah.
before my brother came around, I was like the the dad's kid,
Yeah.
or in a tomboy, all those kind of things. So it's interesting to hear you saying you just kept trying to tether to, and now, fast forward, you're in Mexico with your mom and you're hearing the things like sometimes parents or people that are blessed to have kids just never get it.
Yeah.
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 Do you think that was him in some type of way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, up until his last moments, I feel like he just never felt that what maybe my own assumption of like what that parental instinct and feeling
Mhm.
might be.
Yeah.
Like it just was never there for him. And he was the baby of 5 kids. And like I think had a lot of stuff given to him, which is not,
It's fine,
it's
but
fine. But it does impact, I think, your perspective on a lot of
yeah.
things in life. And so, but in a way, hearing my mom talk about it was very validating to me because I also feel like my sisters did not have, they've experienced some things, but definitely not as much in an intense way as I did for
Yeah.
as long as I did. And
Yeah.
so I often feel like I'm standing on my own island with
Mm.
like my dad was my dad in a very specific way to me, but that wasn't the same dad that my sisters had.
Mhm.
Um, and so hearing my mom actually like validate a lot of things of like my dad's behavior and narcissism and all of those things, I was like, okay, this is actually, it's comforting to me in a way
Mhm.
to know that, you know, almost like I'm believed, like
Yeah.
someone else has
Yeah.
experienced this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel you on that. Sometimes I'm like, is anybody else feeling,
Yeah.
experiencing this? Like, is it just me?
Yeah.
I know I'm not like cuckoo. So
Yeah.
okay, maybe I am. Oh, no, I'm not. So
Yeah.
I definitely feel you on that. So shifting a little bit, but
Mhm.
not really, when we're moving around this world, sometimes I always talk about like every decision I make, I kind of already know how it's gonna end up.
Sure.
Right. But that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna experience, like, some shitty things too.
Yeah.
So what is, like, one of the worst decisions that you feel like you've made, and how did you, like, turn it around to be something positive in hindsight, retrospect, or even in the moment, like
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. I think, like, when I think of kind of monumental moments that were learning opportunities for me, there's one that always comes to mind, and it was, and this is fast forward to only a few years ago, but it
Mhm,
was, just a conversation that came up in the wine industry, which I'm obviously a part of,
mhm,
with a certain producer who, my husband actually, who was designing wine labels at the time and was, designing wine labels for this woman makes wine in Southern Italy.
mhm.
And, there was a story that broke out that, the farm that her father basically had been exploiting workers and people on
Okay.
his farm. And there was no direct tie at the time to whether or not she was liable, but kind of like,
It's like,
yeah, something's not right here.
like you knew.
Yeah. And so I went out publicly and kind of supported her just as a woman and was saying like, "Oh, we need to be standing by her right now instead
Mhm.
of like
Chastising her,
yeah."
yeah.
And somebody held me accountable to that statement. And like actually it was really powerful because I felt so it was the first time that somebody had chosen to like say, "No, that's not kosher. Like what you're saying is you're excusing this person of accountability by just choosing to like identities are not credentials in this situation. Just
Mm,
because she's a woman doesn't mean that she's like not capable of also causing harm to other people." And it was a very reflective moment where I almost sat in my shame for a few days of like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. This person called me out. Why did they do that? Like, uh, feeling like self-pity in a way. And
mhm,
then a friend of mine that I was, like, complaining to was like, "I think this person's actually holding you accountable because they care about you because you're in, like, a leadership role,
mm.
and, um, that's a good thing." And so I, like it took me some time, but I thought about it, and it ended up shifting my perspective, and there was so much growth that came out of that moment for me, um, that I felt like I just had kind of woken up to this, I don't know, just
Like a reality.
yeah, like a reality check.
Ooh,
Um,
that's powerful. Like, I think I've heard you, like, allude to that or
mhm,
talk about it, but not I haven't ever heard, like, the whole story around that because you were talking about being held accountable for something. So that's really interesting because I know in the work that I do with the Us Space, with this podcast, I remember when I started the podcast and I was like, "Well, shit, like, how normal can all of these stories be?"
mhm.
Because we open up season 1 with, Christina, and she's talking about at the time, she was, like, 40, I think 40, 41, and she was talking about what I would identify as an eating disorder and what she identified is, a lack of control.
Mm.
And the second one was with a lady that escaped the Iran-Iraq wars and says that chopping off her breast for breast cancer was easier than getting a divorce. And then at
Wow.
some point, I'm just like, where like how do I hold myself accountable for fostering these stories?
Yeah.
And like I think that that is an underlying reason why it took me so long to get out the first season because I always talk about like listening to my voice and me talking and I'm like shut up, Legina.
Yeah.
But also it's like it's scary to be holding somebody's story like that in like this powerful way.
Yeah.
Um, but also under or on top of this premise of wanting to always support women. But then we look at stuff like that, or the fact that like human trafficking,
Yeah.
which is modern day slavery,
Yeah.
is also women lure other women in.
Mhm.
And so what did you do after you did your woe is me for a little bit?
So this all happened on Instagram.
Oh,
It's a very public
yeah,
space.
how fun.
Yeah, it was very fun. But I decided to hold myself accountable after that by rather than deleting the things that I had said,
Mhm,
I screenshotted them and I saved them and then I reposted my like initial
mhm,
comments and posted like a whole thing about why I didn't feel that way anymore, that the error in what I had said,
mhm,
apologize to the people that were impacted by it. And basically, it's still on, like, people can still literally go onto my Instagram. It's still
mhm.
there. Because I think it was a mistake that a lot of people would have made. And I have seen other people make that mistake
Yeah,
too. And I think there's something to be learned. Like I just want to I think we should all be in a space or get to a space where we can view mistakes like that more as a learning opportunity and share that learning opportunity with our community,
yeah,
rather than like feeling shame about it and taking it down and hiding from it. And I don't know. I just think, at least I know in my how, like, just as a public figure in both my restaurant and with the nonprofit, that is a responsibility that I have being in the position that I'm in. Um, and I think that we should just like be more open to,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I completely feel you and understand, and as you say that, what comes to mind for me is, like, cancel culture,
Right.
and I think that cancel culture comes in because people don't take accountability for
Yes.
what they act like it didn't happen
Yeah.
and delete things, and that's when people are like, "What the fuck you did say?" And I always tell people, I reserve the right to change my mind,
Yeah.
especially being in front of these fucking mics all the time
Yeah.
and cameras in my face and stuff, like, I'm pretty sure I've said several things, foot in the mouth, all that kinda stuff, and at some point, like, I've kinda just had to let it go and be like, as I'm evolving as a human, as I'm navigating,
Mhm.
this shit ain't easy, and especially if, I consider myself a social impact and civic engagement entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and so, sometimes when you're trying to support good people doing good things, other things get wrapped in there,
Yeah.
and discernment can only be so great.
Yeah.
So,
And you have to normalize making mistakes because that just shows that you're trying
yeah.
and it's better than just not doing anything.
Mhm, mhm. I think trying is super important. This wine is good, so y'all
It's
are
so
just gonna
good.
hear me, keep gulping and all that stuff. So let's rewind
Yeah.
and go back to college because 'cause you're in college, you're having these service industry jobs. What are you studying? I forgot what you said you're
I was
studying.
studying cultural anthropology.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens next?
So I start working. I transferred to U of H, and when I moved, I wanted to move into the city,
Mhm.
into Houston. So I moved a little bit closer, and then I ended up getting a job at this really nice steakhouse called Papa's Brothers,
Okay.
on Westheimer.
Papas or papas?
It's called, well, everyone says Papa's, but it's a
Oh,
Greek
it is.
name. It's
It is
Papa's.
PA.
Yeah, that's how the family pronounces it.
Okay.
It's Greek, whatever, yeah, anyway.
Okay.
So,
Papas,
internally, we
y'all.
say papas, but it's pop whatever. I don't even know anymore. So I start working this really fine dining
Mhm.
steakhouse. At this point, I'm already in love with restaurants. Like, I was training kind of at every place I'd been at. I'd started getting really interested in wine, primarily because it was like this mystery item that I had to serve at a restaurant, and it was, like, the one thing that I felt like, I don't know shit about wine.
Yeah.
Like, I can't I feel like if I'm presenting anything, I wanna, like, have info on everything, that like, any question that might come up at my
That
table.
part, same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
That's how
like,
I started
oh,
drinking.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And here we are. And so wine was really exciting to me as I started learning more about it.
Mhm.
And so while I was working at the steakhouse, I was that this restaurant, by the way, has like a wine list that's like the leather bound book with like,
Very
100
pretentious-ish.
pages. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it like weighs probably like 10 pounds by itself.
Mhm.
It was crazy. And I was like, okay, well, this is a really interesting thing. Like, I feel like I could get really good at this, like selling wine. And I knew that I had wanted a career where I would be able to travel. That's what I think what I was drawn to anthropology was like just studying cultures. And I was like,
Yeah.
how do I make a career out of this? And so my mom was actually the one that was like, why don't you be the word sommelier was like just kind of becoming a
Yeah.
thing. She's like, why don't you be a sommelier? Because you can travel to wine regions and you can still work in restaurants and
So
you
your
can
mom
sell
brought it
wine.
up first.
Yeah, she did.
Man, the mamas.
She wasn't even a wine drinker. Now she is. But
So was my mom.
yeah.
I love it. We're gonna keep
Um,
having these wine pods. We're like,
yeah. Uh, yeah, so she proposed the idea to me and I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds pretty cool." And this restaurant had like a team of 5 or 6 sommeliers. And so I was like, all right. So I like marched in one day to the office and was like, I want to join the wine team. And they were like, cool. You need to like get some certifications. You have a lot of studying to do. Like, not everyone can
interesting.
just
Be on the wine
sell
team.
wine at this restaurant because it's like you're selling wine that goes back, like some of the bottles are like 100 years old and
Mhm.
so much to learn. And so that's when I was like, okay, what do I have to do? And I started applying for these wine
Mhm.
certifications. And that's kind of where I entered my wine career.
Yeah. Now I know everybody's wondering wine certifications, sommelier.
Yeah.
What's like the first certification you got or that you should get? All
Yeah.
that.
So at the time, the one that everyone was like, if you're going to work in restaurants and you want to sell wine, you have to go through this court of master sommeliers. And there's 4 levels. So like your intro, your certified, your advanced, and then your master.
Mhm.
And it was like there are at the time, I think 150 master sommeliers in the entire world. It was
Yeah.
like this like 4% pass rate, ridiculously difficult exam.
Mhm.
I was like, cool, I want that one.
Okay.
Like,
Mostly all white males, I'm
oh
assuming.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Still
Okay.
still mostly white males. And so but that was like, if you want to do this, that's the route that you have to go.
Mhm.
And I was like, I want to be a sommelier at this restaurant. I want to work with this wine program because it was like being a kid in a candy store as far as
Mhm.
like the wine world goes. And so I started taking these exams. I started kind of passing them pretty quickly. I took the first and second within 6 months of each other.
What do you have to do? Like, just, like, smell the wine or something?
Yeah. Basically, the first one, it's like more of just like a 2-day class, and then
Mhm.
there's like a multiple choice test at the end. So it's pretty easy to pass the first one if you have like a basic foundation. And they kind of tell you like, this is really important during the class. Like you should mark
Ah,
this down.
yeah. All the good classes are
Yeah.
like that. TABC, all of them.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, it's UBC. And then the second one is like that, and then you have to do a little service practical where you, like, act like you're waiting on a table, and
Mhm.
there's, like, a master sommelier, it's a guest, and they're like, "It's my wife's birthday, we're doing this. This is my mother-in-law, we want a bottle of champagne. Can you recommend a bottle?" And then you have to, like, go through a mock service, and they want you to, like, walk with a tray of filled with champagne glasses to the wall and back and see if you can carry a tray, and then they try to, like, fuck with you a little bit, like, to see if you'll keep your composure tableside. Um, so that's the second part of the exam, and then the third part is the blind tasting, and this second level exam, it's just 2 wines, it's 1 white and 1 red, and you're just doing it on a piece of paper, like, writing down notes about the way it looks, and the way it smells, and then the way it tastes, and then you're taking an educated guess of, like, what it could be, what grape and where it comes from, and
Wow.
yeah.
That's some
Um
serious shit.
and then it just gets harder from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because 'Cause I've met a master som and everybody was like,
Yeah.
"He can" and I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And he poured me ice wine, and I chugged it, and everybody
Good
was
for
like
you.
and he was just like, "Okay, we're gonna try again." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Wait." He's like, "This isn't really" and, he kinda just explained. He was pretty
Yeah.
cool. Super, super old dude, but
Yeah.
he was pretty cool, but everybody around him was very much, like, idolizing him, and
Sure.
I was just like, "Old man, pour me some wine."
Give me that glass.
Yeah, "Give me the bottle." Like, that's me.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're into the wine world now,
Yeah.
and so where do you go from there?
So I got an offer to move to Austin in 2013 by a regular of mine who was like this rich white oil dude
Mhm,
who used to spend a lot of money on wine. He still does, from what I hear. And he wanted to open a restaurant in Austin
mhm.
where he could, you know, uh, sell a lot of his wine from his cellar, which is very illegal, by the way, and just have a playground of a restaurant in Austin.
Do rich
So
white dude shit.
yeah,
Got
doing
it.
doing what they do.
Yeah.
So I was like, cool. The restaurant I was working at, Papa's, I had been working as a junior somm for at least a year and a half, doing all the dirty work of like, let me come in and count the bottles and do inventory and be your cellar rat. And
I feel like you still love inventory.
I do like, I mean, I like organization. Let's just
Okay.
put it that way,
That's fair.
not
That's fair.
inventory. But I was not getting promoted
Yeah.
to a full-time position that I wanted there. And they had hired a few other people during my training and were like, oh, it's only because this person, they have this certification or this level of experience. And so I kept getting skipped over. And I was like, okay, it's just not going to happen for me here. So I took this job. It was my first full-time sommelier position at a French restaurant
Mhm.
in Austin. And I loved the city. It was really fun to be in my mid-20s in Austin, like
Indubitably so. I always say Austin is a city where millennials do not have to grow up.
yeah.
Everything is created for
Oh,
us to stay childlike.
I love that. Thank you for
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
that. Yeah, so I fell in love with Austin and I was working at that restaurant. At that point, I had gone and taken and passed my advanced exam,
Mhm.
which was really difficult, and I passed it on the first go.
Okay.
Yeah, it
It's
was
like the
good.
bar or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I forget what the pass rate is for that one, but I was I was one of 11 people out of like 60 something that took the exam that passed.
Okay, so what is that?
Like
One sixth or
20%, yeah.
a little bit under. Yeah.
Um, and that restaurant ended up closing because surprise, surprise, the oil guy got tired of playing restaurant and realized, oh, you can't just turn a profit on a $5 million build out in a year. So it closed very suddenly.
Mhm.
And I was hoping to move to New York shortly after I moved to Austin with a good friend of mine. Um, and my friend passed away pretty suddenly. She had diabetes. And I was a little bit distraught of like, am I going to stay here? Am I going to still try to make New York happen? Because that
Yeah.
was something that I'd always dreamed about.
Is this
Like,
a friend you knew for a while or you met in Austin?
yeah, no, she was, I'd known her since my kind of my second waiting job, like fresh out of high school.
Mhm.
We were Yeah, we were super close and she had waited tables for a while and then got into disaster recovery work. So she was
Yeah.
working for like a sub company of FEMA
Mhm.
shortly after Katrina. And then she had transferred up to Austin briefly when the fires in Bastrop were happening,
Wow, okay,
and then
yeah.
up to Colorado when the fires around Colorado Springs and Denver were
Okay,
happening.
I don't remember that one, but
Yeah. And she was like bouncing around.
the area.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And she had lived in New York when she was younger. And so she was really excited to move back. And that was our plan. Yeah. And then sometime while I was working at that restaurant near the end, I met my now husband.
Shout out to hubby.
What's up, Chris?
Yeah, it's the homie.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so um is there anything in your life, like a story or chapter that has yet to be untold or unpacked really that you often don't talk about that you're like ready to talk about or open up and have started sharing or are gonna start sharing or you're thinking about it?
Yeah. So and you know this, but I'll say like my dad has been kind of this constant presence of like evolution in my own life personally and like
Mm,
how I like a lot of the things that I feel like I've had to overcome internally. I mean, he passed away at the end of May 31st of this
yeah.
year. And we hadn't spoken in quite some time before he passed. And I'm about to get like very personal for a second,
Mhm.
but one of the biggest things that like caused a friction in our life in my relationship with him was that during that time when I lived with him, um, he uh he molested me one night.
Mhm.
And it was something that I had kind of pushed away for a
Mhm.
long time and still tried to like carry on a relationship with him because I was very, I think, forgiving of, I was just like, he's on so many,
Yeah.
he was not in his normal state of mind, I'll say, I guess. And so I had blocked it out of my mind for quite some time. And then when I finally decided to like deal with it, uh, I felt a little bit shunned from my family. Um,
Mhm.
and it still feels that way in some regards. And so, um, the most beautiful thing that came out of all of it was like I never got the apology that I wanted,
Mhm.
but I moved past the need for that apology because I felt like I had gotten to a place where I was willing to take on my own like responsibility for my own healing.
Mhm.
And so whenever my I knew my dad was close, I got to basically go and see him at the hospital and chose to it was extremely challenging, one of the most challenging things I've ever done, but I chose to walk into that room and decide that I was going to decide the ending of our relationship,
Mm.
and not make it dependent on like something that I wanted from him that
Yeah.
I felt like he probably couldn't give me. And so I still came in and I still asked for something from him, and when I realized that that wasn't possible, I was like, "Okay, this is it. I'm either gonna, like, walk out of this room and this is how it's gonna be, or I'm gonna come back in this room and I'm gonna have empathy and show love right now and create my own."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so I did. I read my dad poetry. I watched meaningful there were some special songs and videos that we used to, like, watch and listen to together, and I played that for him, and I felt like in a lot of ways I got the healing from him that I needed.
Ooh, that's powerful.
Yeah,
But you took your own.
but I made it happen,
Yeah.
and that was the thing is, like,
You
I
were the
think
captain of the ship.
yes,
Mm.
rather
Very
than
interesting.
waiting and
Yeah.
asking, and like I felt like I had been doing for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing you asked for was, I'm assuming, the apology?
I actually asked for him to tell one of my sisters, I'm close with one of my sisters and the other, unfortunately not
Mhm.
because of that story, but,
Mhm.
I just asked for him to tell her that I was being truthful with
Yeah.
my experience, and, he couldn't do that because he wasn't in a state of mind to even remember what he did,
Mm.
and so my sister and I still have a lot of friction, and we don't really talk. But you know, I had to make that ask for myself,
Yeah.
and I'm proud of myself for doing it.
Hell yeah. You know what they say, like, well, I always say ask for what you need and
Yeah.
say what you want
Yep.
or whatever. Because what the worst somebody can say is no.
Yeah.
And it sounds like after the no in whatever form it came in,
Yeah.
you decided what you were gonna do next.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those, well, I know it's one of those powerful things about relationships. I often tell men that I've been with,
Mhm.
you know, the fucked up part and the challenge comes in when you take the decision away from me. You never know what I'm going to decide
Yeah.
and what I can handle and what I want to put up with if you take the decision away from me.
Yeah.
If something's going on with you and we're together and you don't tell me and it directly affects me, you've taken a decision away from me.
Yeah.
And so I think that well, I know it's so powerful that you did that. That's some dope
Thanks.
shit. But that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. Like the way you move is uh it's unique in very many ways, right? But that would be one of them. Like you were like, I'm gonna be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like, I had to prepare myself for what I would feel when I knew I wasn't gonna get like, I would have been more shocked if he would have complied with my request.
Right.
So I almost was certain that it wasn't
He
going to
wasn't gonna
happen,
happen.
but I prepared myself for that.
Mm,
And so I didn't put all of my energy into hoping and assuming that he would do what I wanted
yeah.
because I mean, people don't often do what we want, right? And
Girl, I'm like, yeah, yeah. On some real shit.
yeah,
Okay, so that is a huge unpack, right?
yeah,
And not necessarily a what if, but you said you spent a lot of time preparing for the basically the nah, that's not happening, or
yeah,
in whatever form it came in. If he would have said something to your sister, that would have been a whole nother path to go down and
yeah,
a whole nother set of healing.
yeah.
All while, because we're talking about the dynamics of women, all of this is going on, and you're a whole business owner
Oh yeah, that.
in Austin.
Yeah,
And you're not just a business owner, you're a double business owner,
yeah,
a double founder.
yeah,
Yeah. I love talking to double, triple founders. Shout out. Nonprofit and a for-profit business. And then the balance of all that stuff, driving back and forth and everything else.
yeah,
It's a lot,
yeah.
just going through everything. So how do you personally define your femininity? How do you hold on to that? What does it mean to you? What are the little nuances that for you make you feminine in whatever way you decide that is?
Yeah. It's a beautiful question. I think while all of this was happening, the biggest, like, and like we were for the nonprofit, the
Mhm.
conference was kind of happening
Mhm.
at the same time as all of this with my dad in the hospital. Um, it came down to just really like learning to trust people. Like, I don't know, that's not specifically related to femininity, but
I
at that
think it
moment,
is.
yeah, like, at that moment, I felt like, okay, I felt like I had to be in charge at the restaurant or, like, be there, be physically present, running things because we were still less than 6 months into opening. And then here is this conference that is, like, literally the culmination of 4 years coming together in person, and I'm at the helm of that, and then all of this is happening, and I am very much I love to be in control of my environment. And so it was really this moment where I was like, okay, I have to realize that the way that I feel like I'm strong and I always try to show up for my team and show up for other people is literally not possible right now. And realizing that my team can carry me was like this moment of letting go of thinking that I can do it all, that I should do it all, that is what a strong leader is, that if
Mhm.
I'm gonna be like this person in power, woman in power in my business, and
Yeah, all
that
the
I have to
things.
do all these things and I have to do them publicly and I have to hide this part of myself and show up for my team in this way. And I realized like I literally cannot do that. Like it's just not possible.
Mhm.
And so being very vulnerable and letting go of just expectations that I had for myself in that moment was truly like, okay, um, if I want to show up as a leader, this is actually a really beautiful example of like saying that we can't always do all the things all the time. But also there's a lot to be learned from putting your trust in other people. And it
Yeah.
can be a really beautiful thing, even if it doesn't feel like it's going the ways that you might have wanted it to go. Um, just taking a step back and trusting.
Mhm.
I don't know. That's like,
Because I'll say two things. One, at some point, I realized that uh, I've actually never thought that my businesses were me, my babies, anything, not that.
yeah,
I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and then there's me.
yeah,
And I have learned that the people I have to work with need to understand the mission and the vision of the business, but they need to be people that can work with me and I can work with them.
hmm,
Because in general, I feel like I'm gonna always hold up the things that I'm supposed to do, but the things that aren't what I need to do, but the business needs,
hmm,
I need to find people that can do those things.
yeah,
Because I can do it, but it's not for me to do. And so finding people where you can step away and the business is fine. Because I don't know if anybody's ever gonna be able to hold me up.
right,
I don't know about that.
yeah,
I'm heavy in physical pounds and like emotional pounds and just human. design. I'm a heavy ass motherfucker. And I would never charge anybody with that. But like when you say that piece about just that being the power moment
Yeah.
and just letting go, it's so for real.
Yeah.
And you realize you're like, oh, this shit's fine without me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still a nucleus, but if I walk away, shit's gonna be okay. And I love that that's where you go with femininity, because that is something that when we talk about the dynamics of women or the ladies behind the mic or the ladies of Houston or that original season, it's really like women inherently are trained, or it's in the DNA or something for it to be a certain way. And a powerful part of, I feel like, the journey of most women is deciding that whatever that was ain't it.
Yeah.
So,
And changing your mind, like you said.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. That's I love that situationally how you move that, because
Yeah.
it's still very exacting. You mentioned Chris.
Yeah.
Shout out. I would say I want to know, because there's so much going on. Would you go for being crazy rich, like
Mhm.
crazy rich,
Mhm.
as defined for me, and not rich like I'm rich in love or
Sure.
rich in business or
And things,
support,
yeah.
but money,
Yeah.
cash
Oh, I
money,
like money.
Rihanna,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Oprah,
Yeah.
crazy rich, or would you rather be like deeply in love?
Yeah. Beautiful question. So I thought a lot about this answer actually. um I okay, so I obviously I am in love and I've been in love and I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I also know that I am a giver and I love to anything that I have, I just love to give people things.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm not saying I would choose money over my husband, Chris, but love in general, I think I would actually choose Crazy Rich
Yeah.
because I just want to be able to share and give things to people that deserve to have
Yeah. You want the
more.
money, regardless of what you want it for, the money.
Yeah, I want the
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Money's powerful. I
I think
mean,
so.
and I think it can do a lot of good in the world if it's used properly and in the right hands. And obviously, it's not the case right now. But give it some more people like you and me that are doing good things.
That part. I always think about the what is it? Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, in a paradigm shift of a world, because I talk about it with the us space, like everything's on a paradigm shift. If things are naturally created for the white male baby boomer, now we're creating for the woman of color millennial, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this paradigm shift, women of color, Black women naturally bring people with them. And so, what if they were all in charge, right?
Right.
And all of that stuff. So, when I think about this crazy rich idea
Yeah.
and all of these philanthropic social impact, um, I don't think like heart fillers, because I definitely I lead with my heart, and people are like, you shouldn't lead with your heart. But my heart is directly connected to my head, and my head is on my mission.
Yeah.
And my mission comes from my heart. And my business mind leads with the mission. And
Yeah.
since the mission is from my heart, I'm leading with my heart. Like because people are like, emotions are bad. Emotions are great.
They're great.
You just have to know how to foster them.
Yeah.
And as a young woman that has had a period since sixth grade, I have been blessed with learning how to like handle my emotions, and I'm a Cancer.
Yeah.
So when I think about the crazy rich or deeply in love, I have a lot of opinions, and I love that you say crazy rich for those reasons. So what are like 2 or 3 things you would do with that money? And what's the monetary amount?
Oh, I don't even know. Like
Okay, that's fair.
somebody, I think it was, literally, I don't know what crazy rich means as far as like dollar amounts, aside from like millions and billions. Cause
Okay.
we were playing a game one day at the restaurant of like, how much do you think so and so is worth? And somebody asked me, this was a few years ago, like, how much do you think Kanye is worth? And I was like, $19 million. And they were like, that's it. And I was like, oh, wait, that's actually not
It's
like
not a lot of
not a lot
money.
of money.
A renovation takes 19 million. Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would invest in schools for girls.
Mhm.
Education for young women, I think is is definitely, yeah, like girls' schools. I
Mhm.
think there's really something special about having girls around other girls and other women, like especially in their youthful years. Like I never had that. And I think the presence of like women as strength and women in position of powers and seeing that from an early age is really important. So like taking kids on really amazing field trips where they can see people in positions of power that look like them.
Mhm.
But yeah, young girls, I think I would invest in schools. Um, just supporting single parents, single mothers. I don't know, just like
That kind of stuff.
yeah.
What is the selfish thing that you would do for yourself? What would you do for you
Oh, I would travel the fucking world. I would have houses everywhere.
everywhere?
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Mine's houses and boats. If we're
Yeah.
flooding, I'm fucking floating.
Yeah. I wanna live everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, I wanna see everywhere in the world. Like,
Mhm.
that's one of the most that's literally my passion in life. Like, wine I love, but, like, get me on a plane, please. I just
Yeah.
wanna go somewhere, and I love traveling by myself. It's one of, like, the most magical.
Solo traveler.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll have to get some more inspo from you on that one, for sure. So, do you consider yourself sexually enlightened?
So, I don't, I don't know if I fully understand the
Yeah.
question.
I mean, they're all questions as you define.
As I yeah.
Yeah, like, what does it mean? Or yes or no, if you're like, "Nope," but, you know,
Yeah, I don't know.
that's fair.
Uh,
That's fair.
like, I yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, everybody has their own definitions of
Yeah.
things, right? So what is something, um, about you that you want other people to know that, like, your subconscious or the little Rania right here is screaming like, "This is me." What is that thing?
Um, I think that I don't know. I think, that I am often quiet and I'm often shy and I'm often socially awkward, and I
Mhm.
think that sometimes I worry that that comes across as, like, being standoffish
Yeah.
or, I don't know what it means to other people, but I get inside my head a lot about it, and
Mhm.
so I just wanna shout out that, like, I am very socially uncomfortable a lot of the time. And so if I am quiet and if I seem standoffish, it's just because I'm like in my head of trying to be like, no, just go over and talk to somebody. It's gonna be okay. Like you're gonna figure out what to say. Um, yeah.
You spend like 15 minutes doing that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I could see that. That's a good one. So what is something that you may not have fully embraced about yourself, but people tell you is awesome and amazing, that thing that you're working on, loving or growing or enriching in yourself?
Yeah. Um, I think you've mentioned it a couple times about like my presence of like this calmness, but also um deeply like thoughtful, and
Mhm,
I sometimes I love to like that means a lot to me to hear because it transforms like my feelings about like just being sometimes insecure
mhm.
or not knowing how I come off, and I don't know. I like have been went through a long period of my life of being very like unsure of myself
Mhm.
and not realizing that just like being who I am is its own superpower. And so I've heard this more and more just through my work with Lift Collective that people are like, "Oh, like you are this type of leader."
Mhm.
And as someone who grew up, like I never envisioned myself in a leadership position,
Yeah, yeah,
or thought that I would be a leader. And so it means a lot when you and others like say like, "No, it is this really beautiful
yeah.
way that you show up." Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, you're an interesting leader, and I say that because people are like, "When you say interesting," in like the most beautiful way you could think of. Like, I think that you're great. I think that you're humble in a lot of ways that a lot of people aren't, not even me, and even in the way you show up to let other people's ideas flow in, or just being like, I want to do this. I know nothing about it. I'm going to bring in everybody that needs it. And then I'm going to also say, I want you to tell me no. Because that's what you told me. You were like, I want you to come in and just say no to everything that we do that's not going to work for these people in this situation. But you also didn't ask me to represent that group of people versus just like, well, I know you do this work and you love saying like, calling bullshit for things. So come call bullshit. And I think in general for me, when you understand who you are as a person, kind of like is you have more life experiences. I wouldn't say necessarily age, but life experiences. You appreciate people that appreciate you for the things that you already are.
Yeah.
Instead of like the just rigmarole, same old bullshit type things.
Yeah.
Like, here I am. Like, don't ask me a damn question if you don't want an answer.
Right.
So I love that about you. Yeah, embrace that shit. Be an asshole about it. Hell, I love that. Okay, so we're coming to the end.
Okay.
And what I want to note with you is in the here and now, how do you describe the dynamics of women?
Mhm. I mean, I think that the only goal that I like aspire to as a woman and that I hope other women aspire to is to really just find peace and happiness in themselves. Like we go through so much shit.
Mhm.
We are so many things to so many different people. We've been through a lot and we have to fight to survive in this country and in the world, frankly. And I think that the more that we can lean into our own power and the power of like the people that we love and the people that love us,
Yeah.
and find our own healing and kind of figure out what we want our path to look like and define that for ourselves. Like, to me, that is, I don't know, that's like what life is about.
Yeah.
And
That's your definition of our dynamics.
yeah,
It's one.
yeah.
All right. So, okay, that was nice. Thank
That's
you.
good.
I
Thank
appreciate you
you.
sitting down and talking with me. Y'all know how this goes. One, thank you for rocking with us for the last give or take hour or so. These stories are so impactful. Take what you need, leave what you don't. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, sharing, clicking the button, following, whatever it is, whatever platform you're finding and being on. And I appreciate y'all. And as you are growing and navigating and impacting the world that you live in and all of those things, make sure that you're always telling your own story, being your own brand, living your own truth, and standing in your moment.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
All right, y'all. My name is Rania Yasmin Zayyat. I am 36 years old. I hope that you're having a beautiful day while you're listening to this and that you found something in my story that enlightened or inspired you in some way in your life, and that you use it and hold on to it for yourself. You just listen to my story as I live my truth and stand in my moment on the Lorraine Infinity Let's Talk podcast, season 4, The Dynamics of Women. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you so much, y'all. Be blessed. Check on the friend that you think is strong. One love. Peace.